Next on Current News, the Pope calls it a crime against humanity. Now it's soaring in New York City undercover.
Human trafficking and exploitation is increasing during pandemic.
Shootings in the Big Apple are out of control. There's a demand for a big response. Caught on camera, a Catholic church in Park Slope being burglarized. The cops need your help to solve the crime. The legacy of John Hume, the Irish Catholic who played a key role in ending the troubles that plagued Northern Ireland for decades. Plus, a hurricane could be heading our way. We'll have the latest forecast. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Emily Drewby. We begin with the humanitarian crisis that's growing worse, including right here in our own backyard. The evil of human trafficking is accelerating because of the coronavirus pandemic. The Catholic relief agency Caritas says the traffickers are now preying on people who've lost jobs or homes during the outbreak, with victims at risk around the globe and here in New York. As billions of people shuttered their doors to avoid COVID-19, another virus was growing.
Human trafficking and exploitation is increasing during pandemic.
This warning released by the International Catholic Relief Organization, Caritas.
Already, human trafficking victims are exploited because of vulnerabilities, and situations like pandemic just exacerbate those vulnerabilities.
TORI CURBELO works for LIFEWAY Network, a Brooklyn and Queens-based group that fights human trafficking by providing housing for victims and education for the public. She says the U.S. has also seen an increase in crisis trafficking situations, up 40% after shelter-in-place orders were started. These numbers pulled from the U.S. trafficking hotline.
All the attention to this pandemic diverted somehow government and institutions' attention on other, we can call it collateral damages.
As Marta Petrocio with Caritas explains, that includes migrant workers, many of them undocumented, children experiencing violence and forced labor, and victims being trafficked for sexual exploitation. There's a lot of reasons for the surge: housing and job instability, a lack of freedom and ability to get out of a bad situation because of the lockdown and travel restrictions, and an increase in online child exploitation as children and predators use the internet more. A lack of access to resources is also to blame. CURBELO says not feeling supported can make victims put off getting help.
Accessing that help is really difficult for some people to take that step. At any point, they can change their mind.
So how can we deal with this plague? Caritas is calling on governments to provide victims with access to shelters, hotlines, and to put measures into place that can support workers in informal sectors. Individuals can help too by keeping their eyes open.
There will never be, of course, as you may know, a sign that says human trafficking is going on here, but there's certainly dynamics that should make us feel uncomfortable.
Signs of trouble include living with an employer, being unable to speak with the person alone, scripted or rehearsed answers, acting submissive or fearful, and an employer holding a victim's identity documents.
And building relationships with people that we encounter, from coffee shops to the grocery store, and getting to know their names, their situations, that can be mighty helpful as well.
It is estimated that 40 million people are trafficked every year, but only a small percentage of traffickers ever face prosecution. If you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking and needs help, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888 or visit their website humantraffickinghotline.org. Also surging, gun violence in the Big Apple. Shootings so far this year have zoomed past the total for all of last year, and we're only at the beginning of August. To combat the jump, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams is calling for a tri-state gun task force to crack down on the shootings. The NYPD recently dismantled its plainclothes anti-crime unit, some 600 cops who were responsible for getting illegal guns off the streets. This weekend, 15 people were wounded in 11 different shootings. For the year, the number is almost 800, an increase of 80%. Caught on camera, surveillance video shows the moment this suspect stole from a Brooklyn church. It happened at St. Thomas Aquinas in Park Slope. The suspect was in the church for a while. He appeared to be praying, but the Diocese of Brooklyn believes he was just waiting to be alone. The suspect cut open one of the wooden collections boxes and made off with an unknown amount of money. The church's administrator says he understands many are struggling because of the pandemic, but that the person should have asked for help, not stolen from them. Police are still searching for the suspect. The cops are asking anyone with information on this incident to call Crime Stoppers at 800-577-TIPS. Again, that's 800-577-TIPS. The New York State Child Victims Act look-back window is being extended for a full year. The law, originally signed by Governor Andrew Cuomo in 2019, gives survivors of childhood sexual assault the right to sue their alleged abuser, no matter how long ago the incident occurred. Now the governor is approving an extension for civil suits until August of 2021. The COVID pandemic's disruption is being cited as the reason why the extra time is needed. A federal judge is speaking out for the first time since her son was killed and her husband shot at their New Jersey home last month. Judge Esther Salas took to YouTube to call for greater privacy protections for judges.
We are living every parent's worst nightmare, making preparations to bury our only child, Daniel. My family has experienced a pain that no one should ever have to endure. We may not be able to stop something like this from happening again, but we can make it hard for those who target us to track us down.
Her son Daniel was a student at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. Bishop James Checchio of Metuchen posed for this 2018 photo with Daniel. The family belonged to St. Augustine of Canterbury Parish in Kendall Park, New Jersey, and Daniel attended the parish school. The Irish Catholic politician John Hume has passed away. He devoted his public life to ending the troubles and decades of bloodshed in his Northern Ireland homeland. Martin Luther King Jr. served as his inspiration. John Hume was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports on reaction in the Brooklyn Diocese to the life and legacy of the man.
He really did believe in the words of Jesus Christ, and I think that carried him a long way.
For decades, John Hume was a voice of peace throughout Ireland.
Breaking down the barriers that divide our people.
The echoes of his calls for unity were heard across the world and still are here in the Brooklyn Diocese.
He was very big into nonviolence, and that was a tough road to take back then because that part of the world became extremely polarized.
Gerard McCabe, the chairman of IABS Charities, Inc., a nonprofit supporting Irish organizations, knew Hume personally. He says Hume was every bit the peacemaker the world saw him to be.
He was a teacher before he became a politician, and he was extremely articulate and very bright, and he knew his history, and just a good conversation.
1 out of 500 people have lost their lives. 1 out of 50 people have been maimed or injured.
The Nobel laureate received the Peace Prize for his painstaking efforts to bring harmony to the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The two territories were in the midst of a decades-long conflict. Hume's peace negotiations, known as the Good Friday Agreement, ended the bloodshed.
He decided to speak to Gerry Adams, sit down with Gerry Adams, and he convinced the other side that they have to sit down with Gerry Adams too, because he was the voice of the majority of the Irish Catholics.
For agreement and for peace and stability.
Father Christopher Heanue, the head of the Irish Apostolate for the Brooklyn Diocese, said he knows Hume's faith guided him throughout his life and political career.
I'd attribute some of that desire to work for the common good, that desire to work toward unity, toward peace, toward harmony, as being a part of his call, of all of our calls as Catholics.
McCabe says now, as the world once again finds itself becoming more and more divided, we could use someone like John Hume.
John Hume certainly provided the paradigm for an environment where people can come together and voice their differences, and at the end of the day, find some common ground.
When it was most unpopular to be middle of the road, John Hume walked that tough path. His legacy will forever be peace. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The Vatican is saying that Benedict XVI is suffering from a painful disease, but his condition is not serious. A German newspaper quoted a longtime friend of the 93-year-old retired pope as saying Benedict is extremely frail. The former pontiff is reportedly afflicted with shingles. Pope Francis is condemning the firebombing of a Catholic cathedral in Managua, Nicaragua. The Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception was set ablaze Friday when an unidentified man threw a Molotov cocktail into the church. The chapel and a nearly 4 centuries old crucifix of Christ were severely damaged. Managua's Cardinal Leopoldo Bernays called it an act of terrorism that had been carefully planned. At the Vatican Sunday, the Holy Father spoke about the firebombing.
Cari fratelli nicaraguense, vi sono vicino e prego per voi.
Francis said the damaged Christ crucifix was highly venerated and sustained the life of the faithful for centuries. Tensions between Catholics and the regime of Nicaragua's ruler Daniel Ortega have been high. Ortega accusing many bishops and priests of siding with opponents of his government. Backers of the regime have attacked several churches, including the cathedral, when critics of Ortega took refuge there. There's a furor tonight after New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez labeled St. Damien of Molokai as an example of a white supremacist culture. The 19th century missionary treated lepers on the Hawaiian island of Molokai before dying from the disease himself. The Democratic lawmaker doesn't want his statue in the U.S. Capitol. Many Catholic leaders are outraged. Los Angeles Auxiliary Bishop Robert Barron argues that linking the saint to white supremacy is ridiculous and insulting. There's a lot more news headed your way. A powerful storm is getting stronger as it makes a beeline to the Big Apple. We're entering a new phase of the COVID crisis, and Dr. Deborah BIRX is calling the news extraordinary. The owner of one of the city's most famous restaurants is saying her place is being forgotten in the pandemic, and that's an American shame.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/sendus and you may see your submission on Currents News.
Tropical storm Isaias is expected to strengthen into a hurricane when it slams into the Carolinas later tonight. And barricades are being set up in New York City to cope with potential flooding. Camila Brunell has the latest.
From Florida to Maine, Tropical Storm Isaias is gaining strength, with watches and warnings now extending across the entire East Coast.
You should take this storm seriously and make sure your family is ready.
The National Hurricane Center forecasting Isaias hitting the Carolinas Monday night as a hurricane. The storm surge could reach 3 to 5 feet. Other hazards include high surf, strong winds, heavy rain, flash flooding, and tornadoes.
We're glad that we're leaving as soon as possible. It's nothing to mess around with. Storms are dangerous.
To the north, major cities like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and New York City will experience high winds as the storm moves east. The Big Apple's mayor also announcing barricades will be set up to prevent flooding in lower Manhattan.
We are not taking any chances at all, and for everyone who lived through Hurricane Sandy, you will remember that we got a lot more than we bargained for.
And the storm hitting amid the pandemic, adding another challenge to the already dangerous situation.
Shelters will screen people for coronavirus symptoms. Let's keep each other safe from the wind and water, as well as from the virus.
The high winds could create widespread power outages from the mid-Atlantic into the Northeast over the next few days. This leaving many in the dark. Camila Brunell, Currents News.
The U.S. continues to report more COVID-19 cases and deaths than any other country, according to new numbers released by Johns Hopkins University. This comes as the White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator, Dr. Deborah BIRX, warns the U.S. has entered a new phase of the pandemic. Meredith Wood has more.
A new phase in the fight against coronavirus. Dr. Deborah BIRX offering a dire new view on America's battle against the pandemic.
What we're seeing today is different from March and April. It is extraordinarily widespread. It's into the rural as equal urban areas.
Dr. Birx's bleak outlook comes as the U.S. continues to report more cases and more deaths from coronavirus than any other country. According to the latest data from Johns Hopkins University, there are more than 4.6 million COVID-19 cases in the U.S., and more than 154,000 Americans have died from the virus. Meanwhile, a forecast published by the CDC projects the death toll could climb to 173,000 by August 22nd.
It's very frustrating as an epidemiologist to see these case numbers continuing to rise without a national strategy, without adequate testing, without contact tracing as we need it. All of the things that we've been talking about for months and months. And these numbers are going to continue to go up until we do have these things in place.
Dr. Birx says there are 20 states that she's watching very closely, and that each state must tailor its response to mitigate cases.
It's not super spreading individuals, it's super spreading events, and we need to stop those. We definitely need to take more precautions.
Meredith Wood, Currents News.
Talks resumed today on Capitol Hill after lawmakers and the White House failed to reach a deal this weekend on a new coronavirus stimulus package. While there is bipartisan support for another $1,200 for qualifying families, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin clashed over the amount of the enhanced unemployment benefits. Pressure to hammer out a deal is mounting as Congress is set to recess on Friday. As Washington continues to search for ways to keep the economy afloat, the shutdown is still forcing many places to remain closed. With people working from home and kids out of school, Americans are spending a lot less money, and that's been brutal for small businesses, especially restaurants. Now, Vanessa Yurkovich reports that many owners in New York City say they feel forgotten.
This is what a casualty of the pandemic looks like. Gem Spa, a corner store in New York's East Village, here for a century, gone in just months.
And I just couldn't look in. It's too much. It's too painful.
Parul Patel's family owned this place for 34 years. It's been an iconic part of New York City's music and art scene for decades.
This pandemic was something that was just not something that we could overcome.
More than 100,000 small businesses in the U.S. closed by April because of COVID-19, laying off thousands of employees. A new stimulus bill is being negotiated in the Senate, but for Patel, it's too late.
One thing the government could have done to prevent somebody like us from closing and other businesses is a rent freeze. That would have been very, very powerful.
In Harlem, the owner of Safari Restaurant says revenue is down 90%. Mona BIRJEEB says the only reason her restaurant is still open is because her landlord has not evicted her.
I will stay open until my landlord comes to me and tell me, hey, either you have to pay me or you have to leave. But until then, I do anything I can do to stay. This is my dream, and this is my life, and this is my community.
41% of black business owners shuttered during the pandemic, the most of any group. And more than a third of immigrant business owners closed too. BIRJEEB has applied for several loans, but says she's only received one for $5,000. That doesn't even cover 1 month's rent.
Being a black and immigrant is even harder. Like, the resources is very limited. So it's a really struggle just not being just a small business and being black. On top of that, you are an immigrant and you are a woman on top of that. So it's not easy.
The iconic Sylvia's is one of Harlem's largest minority employers. Dining at the neighborhood institution is a rite of passage for celebrities and presidents. To date, the owner says only 30 of their 117 employees are back on the job.
When the nation bleeds, Harlem hemorrhages. Everything impacts us. So if we're in a community that has a large number of unemployed, then where's the spending coming from?
Pre-pandemic, half of Americans in the U.S. private sector were employed by small businesses. Since then, the hospitality industry has taken the brunt of the economic pain.
I don't know what's in the stimulus package, but if it doesn't include a specific amount, large amount for the restaurant industry, then shame on America.
That was Vanessa Yurkovich reporting. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce reports that nearly a quarter of small businesses have had to close their doors for good since the start of the pandemic. Still to come on Currents News, 2 stories spanning generations. A 5-year-old boy is officially a genius, and now he wants to take on his dad. And Major Bill is a very special Marine, and he wants to climb more hills one at a time. He's only 5 years old, but already Liam Patel has been accepted by the World Elite Organization for Geniuses, Mensa. Evan Forrester met up with Liam in Pennsylvania and saw for himself just how gifted the child really is.
It's an easy peasy one. I can remember these. They're easy.
Liam Patel loves math and learning. He does it all with ease at just 5 years old.
First, I learned from my parents. Then I started to get smarter so I could remember by myself. That's how I could do it all by myself. It was like so. I had to first learn from my mom and dad, and then I got used to it.
He even got to teach his twin sister. They both recently finished kindergarten at Kissel Hill Elementary School in Lidditz, Lancaster County. And before moving on to first grade, Liam's parents wanted him to be on the fast track to success. Avi Patel says it's the things he saw his son was able to do that he and his wife felt the need to challenge his intelligence.
Had a very analytical mind, engineering sort of mindset, was really good at recognizing patterns and obviously being able to do math when he was 3 years old. So we brought that up to his teacher, and she suggested that maybe we get him tested for giftedness.
Liam's teacher tested him for the Mensa Foundation's Gifted Youth Program. Mensa is a nonprofit organization that sponsors educational activities, scholarships, and awards for gifted youth. The organization is open to youth who score 98% or higher on an intelligence test, and Liam's IQ score was high enough to be accepted into the organization.
They gave me a note, and guess what? In the note was I could go into first in math.
Liam's parents feel this new step can help him explore and fulfill his intellectual curiosities.
We're obviously very proud. We just want to make sure we provide him an environment where he's challenged and has a chance to learn and grow.
Daddy learned how to he learned how to code when he was 15, but I'm going to try to beat him. Is that right, Daddy?
Evan Forrester filing that report. Now, you might think 5 is exceptionally young to be accepted into Mensa, but Liam is not the youngest member of the International Society. A 3-year-old Malaysian boy is currently the youngest Mensa member. And finally tonight, America's oldest living Marine has climbed another hill. Major Bill White chalking up his 105th birthday. And not even the pandemic could stop friends and family from celebrating the milestone at the California Assisted Living Home where he lives. Major Bill was asked how he felt about it all.
It feels just as good as it was 104.
He was in Shanghai before World War II and the Japanese invasion and all that. His Iwo Jima got blown up with a grenade, recovered from that, spent 30 years total in the Marine Corps. Just an amazing guy.
This isn't Major Bill's first brush with fame. Back in February, the veteran received over 500,000 Valentine's Day cards after asking for them. He says one of his secrets for living a long life is that he keeps his mind sharp by reading. And that is Currents News. I'm Emily Drewby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.